want to talk about how society is kind of just falling apart. We see that in Louisiana, we have the chemical plant explosion. Previously, we had a series of train derailments last year and a new train derailment, sorry, in and around Philadelphia very recently. Now, my theory is that this is due to a general breakdown in sort of the natural order of society. Some people are accusing of terrorist attacks, some kind of coordinated attack on the U.S. in general. Do you have a thought on that?
I mean, I don't think it's terrorist attacks. I think
No,
that's silly.
no, you don't think there's little green men roaming around? No.
Look, QAnon and 4chan can do whatever they want to. I'm not sure about that. Like, I don't. Did, uh, Degradation of society makes more sense, right?
Yeah. No, I'm just kind of
I know. It's just the
pushing buttons a
reality
little
of
bit.
it, right? Like, if you
No,
look at it, you go, okay, well, I mean,
yeah, it's a
it's just like, okay, well, is it more likely that somebody set up some sort of bomb to go off and blow some of this shit up, or is it more likely that it's just incompetence because society's trying to fall apart because, I don't know, we're stupid about shit? I mean, my guess is we're stupid about shit. Like, that's the reality.
yeah. Yeah. All right, there we go. Wrap it up. No, I absolutely agree. I think it's what you get after years and years of overregulation and focusing on things besides merit as reasons for hiring, promoting, or preferring candidates. So I don't know if you're familiar with the movie Brazil, but it takes place in is a it's a dystopian movie, kind of pseudo comedic, that where there is just rampant ridiculous levels of bureaucracy where everybody has to be licensed to do anything. If you don't have a license to do something, you can't. And every job is just has to constantly deal with massive amounts of paperwork. Everything needs to be approved in triplicate, standard bureaucratic procedures, but on a massive scale. And in it, there are these terrorist attacks. Things blow up, and things are falling apart basically as a result. Like the thing intentionally being destroyed. Um, and I haven't seen the whole thing, mostly just kind of clips, reading experts of it. But it's either revealed or at least alluded to that these attacks aren't really terrorist attacks. They're just the consequences of incompetency, of people being bad at their jobs or not knowing what to do. And in it, they rely on these sort of magical machines. Not magic, they just don't know how they function. I think we're starting to see a little bit of that in our daily lives where people are using things, tools, algorithms, machines that they don't understand.
We've been, I think we've been seeing that for a while.
Oh,
I
it's
mean,
been a long time
just go,
coming.
if you don't believe that, just go watch some man on the street type interviews where they go around and they ask people like, what happens if, you know, the grocery store shuts down, or like, where do you get food? Or people that, what's even better is people that argue like, oh, well, you shouldn't have to kill animals to get food. It's like, well, where do you think steaks come from? Well, the grocery store. Cool. Where do you think the store gets them? I don't know. Like, these people have no clue that steaks come from a cow, whether you see it being murdered over here or if you go to the store and buy the steak there. It still means a cow died so that you could put a steak on your table.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, I
that's the
think
reality.
even if you don't believe that people are actually that stupid, then
Oh
they're
no, I
just
believe that they're
caught
actually
off
that
guard.
stupid.
Well, okay. Hypothetically, if you don't believe that, they're that stupid.
You haven't met enough
Because I know
people.
you believe them that's stupid. You have probably one of the lowest opinions of the average person that I know. Not saying you're wrong. But uh,
There's lots of case studies out there that prove that I might be right at the very least. Like I'm
well,
not saying I'm completely right. I'm just saying like I think the scale tilts in my favor. That's all
look,
I'm saying.
I've been lowering my assessment of people continuously until I've hit the floor, and I haven't really hit the floor. Like I
So
still
close
need to
though.
keep going lower, and seems like they're really that dumb. So you might be onto something, but I'm not there yet.
Fair enough.
Ours. So if you don't think they're that stupid, then you can at least recognize that they're just at the very least caught off guard by these questions. They don't they're not consciously aware of how these systems work. Yeah, they could probably figure it out. I mean, they may know that steaks come from cows ultimately, but they don't understand the whole process very well. I know you don't believe that.
I
We've
still
already
don't dis
established
I
it.
still don't agree with that. I mean, like
I
I
I know.
I think that there's a portion of people who clearly could learn it. They just aren't incentivized to. Like they have no
Well,
incentive to, and they don't care to. Okay, fine. I think there's also a portion of the population, and it's actually been shown to me to be larger than what I originally thought it was, that just can't understand that concept at all.
yeah, I don't know how much they can understand or just don't want to.
It
I
could
think there's a
be,
lot of it. They don't
could
see
be.
like what's the purpose? How is this going to change my everyday life? What is that like? I've been alive for 20 plus years,
I
or in
mean,
my case more.
yeah,
But
it won't until it does, right? That would be my
exactly,
response. Like it won't matter. Like
exactly.
won't until you go to the grocery store and there's no food on the grocery store shelves, and then you go, okay, cool. Um, where do where do tacos roam wild? Like where do I find them in the wild?
The
Well, you
tacos
don't
roam free.
because yeah, they don't have a natural habitat that I'm aware of. I mean, could be wrong, but like that, and so you need to know those. Like that's one of those things that I had people whenever go back a couple of years whenever there was this big deal where a bunch of people were most everybody was locked in their houses and there were shortages of things and that kind of stuff and I had a lot of people that I knew that were panicking about it and they're like, you're not worried? No, not at all. Why? Well, that's weird. Why are you not worried? um, well, I'm not worried because I know where food lives, right? I know that I see a cow out in a pasture that's food, and I know how to turn a cow into food, which is the key. Like that's really, I think, the key part because a lot of people may realize that steaks come from cows, but it's a different being, like it's a different world knowing that steaks come from cows and being able to turn a cow into steaks. That's those two different, very different things. So, like, yeah, I don't worry about
Oh
it.
yeah,
I have
I
friends who
mean,
raise cows, and I can call them up and be like, "Hey, you need some help, some extra hand." It's no big deal.
yeah. I mean, I'm a little more removed, but I know a guy who knows a guy.
Yeah,
Like, I and I could,
let's be real. If things get
I'd
bad
probably
enough,
butcher the butchering, but
it doesn't matter if you know the guy or know the guy. Like, if you see a cow, you make it food.
yeah, if it comes to that point, I would recommend other people stay away from these cows because they will be protected
Hmm.
by armed guard. But
Yeah,
just, but yeah, no,
or
I
a
mean,
deer,
like
right? Like
I could,
you see a deer, right?
yeah,
Nobody's gonna like if you shoot a deer. Let's assume that it's not on a high fenced ranch, right? It's not contained. Then it's considered a wild deer. If you happen to shoot one because you're starving to death and you need to eat, then yeah, okay, no big deal. Turn it into food.
huh, yeah, I could figure out how to do that. Doesn't seem that hard. Basic knowledge, probably, like I said, butcher the butchering, but it would be edible for the most part.
I mean, if you took biology in high school or college, you probably dissected a cat. I'm just guessing.
A cat, really? Hmm. We did frogs.
Oh, dude, we 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 started with like crawfish and then like moved our way to cats.
Okay.
I got exempted from doing cats.
I would not have liked to do cats. That'd have been unpleasant.
It's
But
it's a mammal, and my high school biology teacher also happened to be a football coach and was a hunter. And that was back in the days whenever I was working on the ranch and guiding all the time. Not a problem. He was like, "You got this. Like I've seen you do this. You'll scare people in the room." Be like, "Coach, it's done." Like, what do you mean it's done? Like I'm done.
just skin it too.
It's a much smaller animal. Like, yeah, it just doesn't take much.
Flap, flap, flap. Yeah, I mean, but no, getting back to it, the idea of it doesn't affect my day to day life. How could this possibly work for me? It was the same kind of idea you probably saw in Brazil. It was like, well, the machine has always worked. It's worked the entire time I've worked here. The 25 years I've had this job, the machine has always worked and it's always just done that. Why do I need to understand it? The guy before me didn't understand it. He worked here for 50 years, and that's what we're seeing, a lot of it. And it's not just rampant bureaucracy. It's really anything that degrades the or dilutes what gets you the job in the first place. And the
Yeah,
the dilution is basically anything besides merit.
sure.
So, I mean, you can just think about it is kind of motivation. If I'm going to put in a bunch of effort to be really good at the job, then if there's if that is less likely to get me the job, then I'm going to put in less effort.
Yeah, the question is, what's the point of putting in ex extra amounts of effort if you're already at a disadvantage and likely not going to get the job anyway,
Right.
right?
Well, and
And I think
it's
that's saying what you said in just kind of a different
yeah.
way. But I mean, what's interesting is this is something I don't know that we ever in our previous discussions talked about this, but this could be a very viable reasoning for all of the issues that we had, I don't know, a couple of years ago when we were having a lot of destruction and fires at food manufacturing facilities. This is not a theory that I think that any of us really brought up or talked about when we were having broader conversations. Um, we found it interesting that it just happened to be kind of, and honestly, I don't even think that was necessarily outside of norms, because a certain number of those kind of incidences happen every year, no matter what.
But
Um, and but it was interesting, and it just happened to be getting national attention because everybody was pointing it out. And so I don't know that it was necessarily out of the ordinary, but I do think it's funny to think back on it now and go, hmm,
yeah.
I wonder if that was some sort of if that could have been the cause of why that was and why those were happening, because like they're very deep. That industry is very deep into lack of meritocracy.
Oh, sure. And I
So
remember, and you think about it, at the time, everything the system was stressed, which is precisely when you start to see more breakdown. The more breakdown or the more stress, the more breakdown. So the idea that I think there was slightly more disasters and fires during that time, I'm like, well, yeah, you had a bunch of changes in the way things were done, and people that didn't necessarily understand how the jobs worked trying to manage those changes. So they're going to have arbitrary rules. It's like, okay, so we can't be within 6 feet of each other. How are we going to carry this 3 foot long thing that normally two men carry?
sure,
What? Yeah, like that's you'll get people that just they're like, well, but we have to do that, and like and so you just get people coming up with weird solutions that go poorly, or you know, we need to double check this checklist, and normally we do this standing next to each other, so we have two eyes on it. Okay, well, we can't do that, so I have to put the checklist down, hand it to them, and things break down. Like that's maybe a little esoteric one, but it is everywhere that it's going to be affected. You cannot necessarily predict which ways it's going to go wrong. This is why having
Well, and
experts that are competent and know what they're doing is important.
I think part of it has to do with I hate to say this, but the capitalist, crony capitalist society that we're living in. Um, One of the things that we've seen in society in the last decade, specifically that I've been aware of, I'm sure it's probably happened much longer than that, is venture capital. Venture capital has been a big driver, especially in the last decade. And one of the things that they do is they do a lot of um, head count cutting,
Yes.
efficiency, cutting corners, everything that they can do to maximize profits, or at least the bottom line on the P&L. And so I think part of this also comes from that, because I've seen it happen, right? Like there's plenty of stories where people have literally said, okay, well, why are you double checking everybody's work? We haven't had any incidences with X, Y, or Z. And so they go, okay, well, we don't need to double check that. We're going to have you do something else and that will make us more efficient. Well, the reason they didn't have any issues because somebody was always double checking the work. And now that you don't, then all of a sudden you start seeing more issues.
Well,
And so I
yes.
think that could be a very real, I think it's a compounding issue, not necessarily the, I think all of these issues compound on one another. How about
Yes.
that?
I mean, it's so I I'm glad you brought that up because it reminded me of what I was thinking about this when I was first encountered this topic. Um, it's what I call the uh, uh, out of control business school problem. So it's I had a better name for it, but the this was something where I like it's if you look at the evolution of these business school trends, there's certainly value to what you learn in business school. Like you learn how to optimize systems in sort of an abstract level, and as a systems guy, that I can appreciate the value of that significantly. Supply chain automation or optimization, and some of what you've talked about, Sean, where you're scheduling processes or you're trying to make sure that equipment is properly utilized throughout the entire window of use, as rather just staying idle. Those are
Hmm.
some techniques you can learn through business school, and they're very valuable compared to the alternative. But what happens is you apply those techniques, and then you're done. Like, yeah, you need to kind of audit it, make sure you're still doing it. You need to train people to do it, but that business consultant you hired now needs to justify his salary in some way. And oftentimes if you're just taking the same techniques, you're kind of trying to push them to the edge and edge and edge where they start to break down in artifacts, right? So they start to have these artifacts of the optimization where the assumptions you make in the business model or the model of the
Yeah.
optimization become more and more significant.
Yeah. I don't, uh, I don't know if that's the case. It may be. Um, if I was going to make an argument, my argument would be that there's a difference between um, theory and execution, and I think that's where you get a lot of missteps. Um,
Let's
I've s- I've seen a lot of people come out of business school who say, well, if you do X, then Y should happen, but that's what it should do in theory. I mean, it's kind of the same theory of like a lot of monetary theory these days, right?
right. Well,
Well,
and that's
X equals Y. What is it? The Phillips curve, right? So if we have X amount of inflation, then in order to get inflation down, then we have to have X level of unemployment. And so the problem is they're loosely correlated, but not necessarily causal. And so it just doesn't track. And so
right.
what you get is a lot of younger people who come directly out of college. And I've seen them several times where they come in and they're like, oh yeah, we have to do this, this, and this. And I'm like, all right, let's have a conversation, because don't get me wrong, when I came out of business school, because that's where I went, yeah, I had a lot of the same thoughts and theories, and I had good people ahead of me that We're like, hey, you know, ease up. Let's look at this and see what the, unexpected and unintended consequences of our actions could be. And I don't think that there are that there are as many people doing that these days as they should be.
Oh,
And so
absolutely. That's kind of what I'm
you're
getting at
running
when I
off of
talk about.
theory, and it just generally doesn't.
Sure. That's kind of what I mean by like the artifacts of the model. So the model you use to implement this stuff, you're making a lot of assumptions. And not all those assumptions are always as true as you think they are.
Sure.
Um, a lot of the assumptions are, well, employees are interchangeable. Well, that's definitely not true. Sometimes they're very often are very not interchangeable. Um, and it's so it's sort of there's and then the assumptions are things like, oh, we know we have the quality control. We know if we're doing a good job. No, you have a good idea if you're knowing what you're doing. You don't know for sure. And so it drastically improves the complexity of this. And I think this is actually normally what happens is there's a negotiation between competent people and theory, like the business school theory. And so you have competent people pushing back that understand kind of their section of the business very well.
Hmm.
Then when abstract um, models, abstract systems, kind of the high level stuff starts to encroach on it and push into it, they're competent enough that they can, and their competency is respected enough that they can push back and force tweaks and modification to that system.
Yeah, or at least slow the snowball downhill roll a little bit, right? Like, hey, before we just fully implement this, how about we test it before we just roll it out? That's,
Right.
I think, you know, a, a, a a good portion of what saves some of this stuff. That's
Right.
the reality.
And
And I agree. I don't think that that's happening near as much anymore. And, I see it every day. Like, that's on a regular basis. It's like, oh, we're going to kick this loose. I wouldn't do that, but you know what? Do what you want to.
yeah, and it's we should have learned a lot of lessons by now, but unfortunately they're just not getting this. They're not closing the feedback loop. They're
Oh,
going,
we're going to
bad
learn a
things
lot
are
of
happening.
lessons. We're
Well,
going to learn a whole lot of lessons in the next couple of years, bro.
yeah,
A
what's the
whole
lesson?
lot.
It's they should have learned the small lessons. Now they're going to learn the big lessons.
Right.
The big lessons being you ran your company, you ran your multi-billion-dollar company terribly and into the ground.
Sure.
Congratulations, you've tanked an entire industry.
Right.
And that's going to happen in a lot of places kind of all at once. That's my theory.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, and
I think it's
it's
going to happen real fast too.
but I guess that's kind of, is there anything people can do to try to limit that effect in their like their division, their department, wherever, or any aspects of their lives? You know,
Um, I'm not sure what you mean by that, so that's really kind of hard to tell. Um, I think we kind of went over this, last time about, indicators that we're looking at and how the 2 and 10 year the 2 and 10 year reverting from being inverted
sure,
tend to be a short-term indicator. I don't think that that's going to be the case this time because usually it's 3 to 6 months. I think it's going to
sure,
be way faster. I think it's going to be like a month and a
right, right.
half.
No, I'm more in the idea of as an individual, is there anything I can do to try and create more of a pocket of competency? I guess sort of fight this trend in a more localized level or avoid it. Um,
Fight the degradation of society, like
well,
this trend that we're talking about,
I
or are
mean,
you talking about like prepare yourself for the fall this autumn?
um, I mean,
So two
I
very
guess they
different
kind of they
things.
kind of go a little hand in hand. I think because if you can
They
create a
they
pocket of
do, but
competency that does kind of help insulate you from the fall, but
it's too late.
too late. So if you're a department manager or a small business owner, is this something you can do to try and make it so that
Get ahead of the
you're
curve.
get ahead of the curve?
Yeah. So so for small business owner, manager, whatever, same same rules apply to individual, just on a larger level. Cut costs, make yourself invaluable to the company, and prepare for what's coming, right? And by cut costs, as a manager, that means firing people.
Well, I guess that probably goes into what my suggestion would be is both hire and fire smart, right? If you know that these systems in place are designed.
You should not be hiring anybody right now unless they are above, like way above
Well,
average, like
that's
super above average, just because
I don't.
you can upgrade your team.
Yeah, I mean it's filling
Because otherwise you're gonna
headcounts
have
is
to
a
lay them
bad
off.
idea. Yeah, filling headcounts to fill headcounts is a bad idea. But I
Well,
mean,
this
there are
is,
cases where you
I
still
mean,
should be hiring, but they're
if you're a
rare.
manager at one point, yes. If you're a small business, probably not. You should not be hiring anybody, period.
I
Unless
mean,
it's unless you have a gap that nobody can fill, and then you either need to see about, like, who can I move that can fill this gap, or who am I going to have to let go so that I can hire the person that I have to fill this gap. Because that's kind of how that has to go. Really, what you
yeah,
should be doing if you're a small business is you should be filling that gap. Just try to keep your business afloat.
yeah. I mean, I don't know if you can say universally that no one should be hiring. That seems like that's going to be
Not not you. I mean, it's nothing is absolute. This is in general.
right. And that's kind of what I'm saying is that yeah, you're probably not going to be hiring. That's the reality of the economic situation.
Well,
And if you are
and
hiring, you should probably be looking for like a specific candidate, so to speak. You're not looking to
I mean,
just fill a headcount.
right? No, absolutely. So let me be super clear on this. One, you should not be just hiring anybody to fill a headcount. That's absolutely accurate. Two, you should be looking at your team to determine if you have the right people on your team, or if you need to, because you may be like you may be heavy, and if your department's heavy, you may need to fire people and get that under control real fast. Like, for instance, say you owned, I don't know, like a car dealership, and you're not selling any cars, and they keep stacking up on the lots. Now, a lot of those people that work there, especially the salesmen, they work on commission. So that's probably not a big problem for you, because it's not a cost uh, per se. But if you have a huge, a huge number of people that work for you, that usually you would need for, processing all the stuff that you're going to process, maybe you don't need all that much anymore. And that's something that you need to take into account before, because again, you want to be ahead of the curve. Because if you're behind the curve, then that's going to cost you a lot of money.
Yeah.
I mean, what was it? 1 month, 3 month T-bills. This today hit 5.4. 5.4.
Hold on a
So
second.
what that means is, if you're rich, right? Like, you got $10 million sitting in a bank somewhere, rich, you should, not financial advice, but if hypothetically, if you were to take advantage of that, you could, and of course you wouldn't want to put it in 3 months, you'd want to push to a 10-year or a 30-year T-bill, which are priced cheaper, right? But still, I think they're 3.3, 3.6%. Well, you could park money there and get a 3.5%, let's just say 3.5% return for the next 30 years. You never have to, like, you don't have to go work. You don't have to worry
Right.
about investing. You're not, like, in a couple of years when everybody's trying to find something to invest in to make some decent returns on, you don't have to take that risk. You have essentially zero risk assets.
Yeah.
Done.
Sure. And we kind of covered a little bit of that last time, but no, I mean, I think it's important to focus also on how when you are inevitably going to have to let people go. Almost if you have people that work under you, you are almost certainly going to have to fire somebody. And I think it's important to understand the
You need to get
the
lean,
metrics used.
like your team.
What's that?
If you're a manager, your team. If you're
Shit.
a business owner working on getting to essentially what you would consider a skeleton crew. Okay.
Yeah, sorry. I think that we've broken up here a little bit.
Yeah, I know. It's okay.
I couldn't hear you, so I don't know what you're saying.
Okay. Yeah, I just said that you need to get lean. If you're
Yes, but I
whether
think
you're a
what I was getting is
manager or whether
how.
you're a small business owner, you need to go through and review everything, everybody, what you're doing. Is anything superfluous? Are you wasting time and money in different places? And you need to get that lean and you need to do it quickly.
Yes, you need to, and it's, I think you have some time, so do it right. Plan. Um,
Yeah.
but hold on, I'm gonna. All right, I think I've got more stable connection now. But what I'm saying is plan it right, evaluate your team, and not just for simple metrics. Don't shortcut it. Don't like. Do not just go off of well the sales numbers or anything like that. If there's any metrics are fine to consider, but if you're making this decision based on easily measured metrics, you're doing it wrong.
You need to make
Because
this decision and understand that do it like your life depends on it because it could.
yeah, you got to recognize that it's not about like you can do it by the numbers, but you need to understand that a lot of businesses die or thrive or die in this situation based on the intangibles.
Yeah. I mean, it's really like it doesn't matter if you like somebody. Like, well, I like Joe. Cool. Joe doesn't do anything. He's dead weight. Cut him loose.
Or even so, maybe it's Jim
Becky
who
plans out
gets.
all of the birthday parties for everybody. That's great. What else does Becky do? Nothing. Gotta let her go.
But even so, I'd say if you have Jim who's got great sales numbers, but it turns out he gets those sales numbers by kind of screwing over some of his teammates.
Oh yeah, it's a perfect time for you to excise any toxicity that you've got on your team.
Right. Or if he started doing that a little bit recently because times are tight now,
Sure.
if there's any indication that he might be that kind of person, get rid of him because yeah, some of these guys may use some slightly subterfugal tactics that aren't great for the team dynamic. And in good times, you don't really see that. As things get tight, you'll see that. Look for the signs of how they're going to play well as a team because you're going to have to lean on each other as a team.
Right.
And
You're gonna have to
sales
literally
metrics
work
could,
as a team.
yes. So these
Actually.
metrics may be great for in terms of by the numbers. But when you ask him, how well does he communicate? How well does he help out his teammates? Does he support his teammates? If you see no, get rid of him because it's not about making every last dollar. It's about surviving this.
Right.
And I think that's the important part. It's the intangibles. It's the guys that are willing to put a little bit of extra effort outside of the strict job duties that they have.
Yeah. Actually, that's a good point. The the first people that you should probably look at cutting are the ones that look at you and go, "That's not my job." Like that
Yeah.
should be a red flag for you. If
No,
people do that, the people that you want on your team are the ones that go, um, "I'm not sure how to do that, but I'll figure it out, or I'll learn it, or yeah, train me and I'll do it, whatever that is." And those are the people that you'll see that you know will likely survive this a lot better. Um, and as a side note, if you're an individual who's not a small business owner or a manager of some kind, and you're working for a company, that's what you should be doing right now. Anytime somebody asks you to do something, you should sign up for it. Say yes. If they ask for volunteers, you should
yep,
volunteer. If
yep,
something is a problem, you should make it your problem so that it's not your boss's problem. That will help you get through the coming layoffs that are going to that are going to happen. That will help you stay on when somebody else gets cut loose. That will
Yep.
happen.
Yep. And managers, you need to be prepared to defend those people. You know, be willing to take the flack and make sure that they stick around.
Or
Because
just remember, if you choose not to, that the person that covered your back, that took care of things that so that you didn't have to, is now gone, which means you're going to have to take care of it and deal with it.
yes, yes.
So
So
if Joe
and
always
maybe
took
that
care of
means
stuff and
they
he hopped on things and did things that weren't his job, but Joe's not the number one sales guy, but he's number two, but he also does all these other things, maybe Joe's the one you keep.
and the reality is you may have to say, look, if you fire me, you should fire me. I get it. Times are tough. You may not be able to find a job, but what you may find out is that if you don't do that, you may lose your job anyways, because you may
Right.
lose the people that make your division profitable, and then they axe the whole division. And the reality is, losing your job now, it may be easier to get a job now versus 6 months from now when things get really tight.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
And and so if when somebody does do the above and beyond, does what you tell them, keep those people, but also you're going to have to support them. You're going to have you're going to have to take care of them. Make sure that they are that know that they're valued. And that's the thing I've seen a lot of managers do is they give you the pat on the back. Good job. Thanks for working overtime. Can you do it again next week?
Yeah, don't abuse your people either. But it's it's fixing it's soon to be a employer's market.
Yep.
We've been in a few years of it being an employee's market, job market. That's fixing to change, like real strong. And it's going to just absolutely beat a lot of people to death because they're just not going to understand how this works.
I think
Um,
unfortunately, literally.
well, yeah, I mean, like that's going to happen. Like, there's no question about that. It's an unfortunate side effect of a lot of these things that go on, but like in reality, there's a lot of people. What was it? Somebody was talking about the other day that you know if people don't really press for raises, don't need to, haven't, whatever. Well, that's great. That's because they haven't. Because in the last few years, at the very least, it has been an employees market, which means that when unemployment's low and they're looking for people, then basically they're already paying top dollar. And because they were paying decent wages, there were a lot of people who were just living well. Well, that's not going to be the case anymore. Like, it is what it is. Like, you're going to have to fight for raises if you want them. And you're going to have to decide whether fighting for that raise is going to be worth it when you're looking at the other option is that, well, maybe you don't have a job anymore because that's the other side of that, right? Like that's how that could turn out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like that's the reality. And
And I
and
mean, I
in
think that's
reality, like you should go into any negotiation whenever you go and ask for a raise with that expectation. If you're not fighting that hard for a raise, don't expect one
yep.
ever.
Yep.
Like anytime I go to my boss and ask for a raise, anytime I've ever gone to a boss and asked for a raise, it's always with the expectation that like this could go badly and I just don't like I get walked out. It's done.
Yep.
Over. Okay.
Yep. No, I mean it's gonna get spicy. There's gonna be a lot of people unemployed. Um, yeah,